Early March, 1943. Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. Captain Paul Irvin Pappy Gunn stared at the bomber in front of him. Oil-stained hands gripped the wrench that had just slipped. What stood before him was not a standard B-25 Mitchell. This aircraft was something forbidden, something never approved by the U.S. Army Air Force. Where a bombardier's glass nose should have been, 8 50-caliber machine guns now jutted forward, turning a medium bomber into a flying warship. Gunn knew this creation could save the Pacific, or land him in a court-martial. What he could not know was that this desperate innovation would help deliver the most crushing defeat the Japanese Navy would suffer in the entire war. Pappy Gunn's war had begun much earlier. On December 8, 1941, Manila time, he had watched Japanese bombers destroy the American Air Forces in the Philippines. At the time, he was the manager of Philippine Airlines, with only a handful of civilian aircraft. Within hours, the Army had drafted him into service, commissioning him a captain. What was supposed to be a temporary role turned into a 3-year odyssey of innovation and vengeance. Gunn was no ordinary officer. He had spent 20 years as a Navy aviator, flying and fixing aircraft since the 1920s. He knew planes inside and out, not from textbooks, but from experience, crashes, and hard flying. But on that December morning, none of his knowledge could protect what mattered most. His wife, Polly, and their 4 children were trapped in Manila as the Japanese advance closed in. When ordered to evacuate to Australia, Gunn had to leave them behind. Weeks later, his family was taken to the Santo Tomas internment camp. Something inside him broke. From that moment, every modification, every risk, every mission he flew was fueled by the same fire. End the war faster, whatever it took. By mid-1942, the Pacific Air War was a disaster. High-altitude bombing barely scratched Japanese convoys. B-17s were missing more than 99% of their targets. Japanese troops poured into New Guinea while Allied forces died on the ground. Then, General George Kenney arrived to take over the Southwest Pacific Air Force. He believed in innovation and, more importantly, he believed in Pappy Gunn. Gunn had already been secretly modifying A-20 Havocs with extra forward guns, and Kenney immediately made him his Special Projects Officer. What Gunn created next would change the war. Working in makeshift hangars, scavenging weapons from wrecked planes, he began modifying the B-25 Mitchell. The bombardier's glass nose came off. In its place, he bolted in multiple 150 caliber guns. First 4, then 6, then 8. He even locked the top turret to fire forward. Now, one bomber could unleash the firepower of several fighters while still carrying bombs. To Gunn, this wasn't theory, it was survival. At treetop height, the modified bombers could sweep ships' decks with gunfire, silencing defenses before skipping bombs into their hulls. It was part science, part desperation, and all vengeance. In early 1943, Allied intelligence picked up Japanese signals. A major convoy was assembling to reinforce New Guinea. 8 transports carrying nearly 7,000 troops, escorted by 8 destroyers and over 100 fighters. If it reached its destination, Allied advances could be stalled for months. If it was destroyed, Japan's position in the Southwest Pacific could collapse. General Kenney ordered everything into the air. The moment had come to test Gunn's gunships in battle. On March 2nd, the Battle of the Bismarck Sea began. At first, B-17s harassed the convoy from high altitude, but caused little real damage. The real blow came the next morning. As the skies cleared, waves of low-flying Allied planes roared in. Australian Beaufighters struck first, strafing to draw fire. Then came the B-25 strafers, charging in at 50 feet above the waves. At 1,000 yards, their 8 forward guns opened up, spewing nearly 200 pounds of metal per second. Japanese gunners were cut down before they could aim. The bombers pressed closer, releasing bombs with delayed fuses that skipped across the water like stones before slamming into hulls. One by one, Japanese transports exploded, capsized, or went under in minutes. Destroyers, too, fell victim. Some set ablaze, others shattered by direct hits. The attack was merciless, precise, and devastating. By the end of March 3rd, all 8 Japanese transports and 4 destroyers were sunk. Nearly 6,000 Japanese soldiers and sailors were dead. Only a fraction of the convoy ever reached New Guinea, many without weapons or supplies. Allied losses: just a handful of planes. The Japanese Navy would never again attempt a large daylight convoy in the Southwest Pacific. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea proved what Pappy Gunn had believed all along, that with the right modifications and tactics, air power could strangle enemy supply lines. His gun-nosed B-25s became the terror of Japanese shipping. Factory production soon followed his designs, churning out new variants, bristling with forward firepower. By 1944, these strafers devastated Japanese airfields, shipping, and supply routes from New Guinea to the Philippines. They were, as one pilot put it, the bats out of hell. But for Gunn, the war was always personal. He fought not only to defeat Japan, but to survive long enough to see his family again. In February 1945, Santo Tomas internment camp was liberated. Polly and the children, emaciated but alive, were finally freed after 3 brutal years. Weeks later, Gunn was reunited with them in Australia. The man who had invented a new kind of warfare finally held his family again. Pappy Gunn remained in the service after the war, retiring as a full colonel, decorated with the Silver Star, the Legion of Merit, and 9 Purple Hearts. He returned to the Philippines to rebuild its airline industry. In 1957, he died in a plane crash at age 57, doing what he had done his entire life, flying, yet his legacy endured. The B-25 Struffer became the most heavily armed medium bomber of the war. Skip bombing and forward gun tactics, born from his grief and ingenuity, became case studies in air warfare. Historians would later say that after the Bismarck Sea, Japan knew the skies belonged to the Allies. Pappy Gunn showed that innovation doesn't always come from official orders. Sometimes it comes from one man in a hangar, working with oil-stained hands, willing to break the rules to win a war, and to bring his family home.